Wednesday, November 29th. I'm Handan in Seoul. Let's start right off with the top headlines at this hour. Breaking a relatively long lull in provocations, North Korea fires off its latest missile into the East Sea. The regime claims it's a nuclear-capable intercontinental ballistic missile that can reach anywhere in the U.S. Presidents Moon and Trump hold phone talks, strongly condemning the launch, vowing for stern measures against the North Korean regime. This, as South Korea and the U.S. both confirm the missile to be an ICBM with a range of over 13,000 kilometers. Bali's main airport has been suspended for a second day as a volcano continues to spew dark ash into the atmosphere. Nearly 60,000 travelers are set to be stranded, while about 200 South Koreans there have begun leaving the island via buses and ferries. North Korea has fired another missile, which is being assessed as an intercontinental ballistic missile by the U.S. and the South Korean military. The missile reached an altitude of 4,500 kilometers before coming down in Japan's exclusive economic zone in the waters west of Japan. What's alarming is that this latest missile flew the longest distance ever, hitting the highest altitude so far, now believed to be able to reach just about anywhere in the U.S. Our Oh Jung-hee now joins us from the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. Jung-hee, give us the analysis.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff have confirmed that North Korea fired a long-range ballistic missile this morning at around 3:17 from Pyeongseong, a city located just 30 kilometers north of Pyongyang. The missile flew 960 kilometers eastward for about 50 minutes and landed in the waters west of Japan. It reached an altitude of 4,500 kilometers, higher than any of the previously launched North Korean missiles. The North announced roughly an hour and a half ago that the missile it fired today is a newly developed Hwasong-15 class ICBM. Earlier in the day, the JCS had presumed that the missile is a Hwasong-14 class intercontinental ballistic missile. The North fired Hwasong-14 missiles twice in July, the first one reaching an altitude of 2,800 kilometers and the second one topping out at 3,700 kilometers. Experts say the frequent launches are to enhance missile re-entry technology, a crucial technology for developing an ICBM. The missile was fired at a lofted angle, and experts say it would have a range of over 13,000 kilometers, meaning it could technically reach anywhere in the United States, including Washington, D.C. and New York. The JCS says the recent launch could be seen as a protest against the recent economic sanctions on the regime, as well as Washington reinstating it as a state sponsor of terrorism. Many experts also add the regime may seek to develop ICBMs that could reach the continental U.S. to have them as a bargaining chip when negotiating with the U.S.
Jung-hee, we have never heard of Hwasong-15 before. This is certainly a very new development. Now walk us through the South Korean military's response.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff say the South Korean and U.S. military detected the missile at about 3:18, a minute after it was fired. South Korean forces launched precision strike missiles near the northern limit line in the East Sea just 6 minutes after the North Korean launch was detected. The JCS says it involved the Army's missile unit, the Navy's Aegis destroyer, and the Air Force's KF-16 fighter jets, each firing at a simulated target, the distance of which is based on the distance to the location where the North launched its missile.
The South Korean military is keeping close tabs on North Korea's military activities. Our military could destroy the origin of the provocation and nuclear facilities with precision on any given day from the ground, sea, or air.
That's all I have for now, but I'll be back with more updates for a later newscast. Tan.
Our Oh Jung-hee at the Defense Ministry first, thank you. North Korea has issued a statement confirming that they did launch a ballistic missile, but the fact that it was a new missile, a Hwasong-15, surprised many. On the line, we have our Kwon Jang-ho at the Unification Ministry with more details. Jang-ho, can you elaborate for us on what was said in the announcement?
Good afternoon, Dan. At 12:30 p.m. South Korea time, the North Korean regime's state media broadcaster aired a special announcement. It declared that a brand new weapon had been successfully launched early Wednesday morning, the Hwasong-15 intercontinental ballistic missile. The missile was said to be designed to reach all of mainland United States and is more advanced than the previous Hwasong-14 ICBM that was tested in July. The broadcast said the missile followed its projected path for 53 minutes, flying a distance of 950 kilometers with a height of 4,475 kilometers. North Korean state media also gave assurances that the missile had posed no risk to any neighboring countries. Leader Kim Jong-un was said to have been pleased at the results, saying that the rocket showed that they had reached their goal of becoming a nuclear power. He also declared it a victory for the North Korean people, despite difficulties from the sanctions imposed by the US and its followers. The statement concludes by saying North Korea is a responsible nuclear power that loves peace and will not endanger anyone unless its rights are threatened. So far, no footage or photos of the launch have been released, but going from previous instances, they are expected to come by the next 24 hours. Back to you, Dan.
Our Kwon Jang-ho for us this afternoon. Thank you. South Korea's presidential office convened an emergency meeting of the National Security Council within hours of the missile launch, and President Moon and U.S. President Trump held a conference call to discuss North Korea's latest provocation. Our chief Blue House correspondent Moon Gon-young now joins us live. Gon-young, give us the details.
Right, Town. So the message is very clear. It's a serious threat to the international community, and South Korea will not just sit back and watch North Korea launch these provocations. That's a message that was delivered by South Korean President Moon Jae-in during the emergency meeting of the National Security Council early this morning, within hours of North Korea's missile launch. So take a listen first.
북한이 핵과 미사일을 포기할 때까지 한미 양국을 비롯한 국제사회는 강력한 제재와 압박을 추진해 갈 수밖에 없습니다.
Now, Town, the latest missile test by North Korea, as mentioned by our Oh Jung-hee earlier at the top of the broadcast, is the first in 75 days and the 11th of its kind since President Moon Jae-in took office in May. So in a bit over 6 months. So on average, that would be nearly 2 per month. Now, what's different about this time is that contrary to previous missile launches, South Korea, and we're learning that the U.S. and Japan as well, were not caught off guard. In fact, multiple sources here in the Blue House tell me that South Korean President Moon Jae-in, during a late afternoon tea time with his chief aides yesterday, asked for ways to give the South Korean public a heads up before today's missile launch so as to reduce the level of alarm amongst the public. And the measure taken was the National Defense Ministry's announcement yesterday of an imminent provocation by North Korea today, which of course Arirang News reported. Not only that, a senior Blue House official tells me that it was as early as Monday, so today's Wednesday, so as early as Monday that South Korean president delegated full authority to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff here to stage a precision strike missile exercise that we saw immediately after North Korea's missile launch, to stage that immediately afterwards. So that was as early as Monday that South Korean President Moon Jae-in gave that power to the chairman of JCS. Town.
Well, Gon-young, tensions are certainly unprecedentedly reaching high. Now, what happens now? We all know that President Moon has been taking a somewhat softer stance compared to U.S. President Donald Trump. Could he perhaps take the path now that is perhaps not so diplomatic?
Well, hopefully not, and no. The short answer is no, Town, at this point at least. But first, I want you to listen to these remarks from South Korean president.
압도적인 힘의 우위를 기반으로 북한의 핵미사일 위협으로부터 대한민국을 보호하고 무력 도발 시 적극 응징하여 위협을 제거할 수 있는 역량을 더 한층 강화해 나갈 것입니다.
So to sum that up, he's made very clear that any kind of armed provocation by North Korea will be met with even stronger retaliation by South Korea based on what the South Korean president has repeatedly called for time and time again based on an absolute dominance of military might, military strength over North Korea, and that's what he called for. He also delivered a clear warning to North Korea that North Korea should in no way miscalculate the situation and threaten the South Korea with nuclear or missile weapons, leading the U.S. to even consider the possibility of a preemptive strike against North Korea. He did reassure that he and U.S. President Donald Trump are working together to manage the situation carefully so that such military conflict does not break out on the Korean peninsula. And perhaps as part of efforts to do just that, South Korean President Moon Jae-in held a crisis call with U.S. President Donald Trump immediately after the conclusion of the National Security Council meeting earlier today, where the two leaders strongly condemned the rogue state for its latest missile provocations, defying all international sanctions, of course. And but what's also noteworthy is that the two leaders decided to further discuss ways to deal with North Korea after a thorough examination and assessment of the level of technological advancement of the latest missile launched by North Korea. So could this make a difference in the way South Korea and the U.S. deal with North Korea, perhaps depending on the level of sophistication of North Korea's latest missile? That we'll have to look out for in the next couple of days. Taun?
Yes, Kanyang, North Korea's missile technology appears to be developing at a much faster pace than many had thought. Thank you, Kanyang, for that. Stay on it for us throughout the day. So, as we briefly mentioned, the United States has condemned North Korea's missile launch, but President Trump's response has been noted for its restrained tone. Japan also promised more pressure on the regime, but so far, crickets out of Beijing and Moscow. Our Kim Hyun-bin has more on the global reaction.
Fire and fury, totally destroy. That's the kind of rhetoric President Trump used when previously talking about North Korea. But the U.S. president's response to the regime's latest provocation was notable for its brevity and muted tone.
A missile was launched a little while ago from North Korea. I will only tell you that we will take care of it. We have General Mattis in the room with us, and we've had a long discussion on it. It is a situation that we will handle.
President Trump added that nothing had changed in Washington's approach to North Korea and that they were taking it very seriously before leaving the room. Later, U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson issued a separate statement condemning the launch. But he also added that diplomatic options remain viable and open for now, and that the U.S. remains committed to finding a peaceful path to denuclearization. In Japan, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe convened a National Security Council meeting before speaking to the press to issue Tokyo's condemnation of the launch. He called it a violent act that can never be tolerated.
Japan will not back down in the face of a provocation, but will maximize pressure on North Korea. We'll continue to protect the lives and livelihoods of the people of Japan under the strong Japan-US alliance.
The U.S. and Japan have also called on the UN Security Council to convene an emergency meeting, which is expected to take place on Wednesday. There's so far no word from China and Russia, the two nations closest to North Korea. Senior diplomats from both countries had suggested that the recent lull in provocations was a sign the regime was ready to suspend its nuclear and missile activities and reopen six-party talks. It looks like those sentiments will now have to be re-evaluated. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
North Korea's missile test comes after a more than 2-month break in provocations. Let's now take some time to look back on Pyongyang's test pattern so far this year and the possible reasons behind this morning's launch. Arirang's Lee Jung-yeon has this report.
North Korea has broken its 10-week lull in missile test launches by firing what appears to be its longest-range intercontinental ballistic missile to date. The latest test, which took place this Wednesday, is the 17th missile launch by the regime this year. And it's the 11th missile test by the North during the Moon Jae-in administration, starting with the Hwasong-12 that Pyongyang launched just days after the South Korean president took office. The pattern of tests conducted by the regime this year indicated there were between 1 and 4 nuclear or missile tests every month, so the 2-month lull in tests had raised hopes, now proven false, that the regime may be ready for diplomatic dialogue. The latest launch, which broke this silence, raised speculation as to whether it can be taken as a sign of direct provocation against the U.S., as it comes on the heels of U.S. President Donald Trump's announcement on November 20th that the U.S. is designating North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism. However, Cho Sung-yeol, senior researcher at the Institute for National Security Strategy, says that based on the altitude and range of the latest missile test, it is most likely to have been planned in advance rather than instigated by certain events. He also added that the 2-month lull in provocations was most likely for preparation and technical fine-tuning to accomplish the North's year-end goal of perfecting its nuclear and missile technology instead of a sign of change, as the international community had hoped. Lee Jung-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korea's intelligence agency says North Korea's latest missile is the most advanced ICBM that it had tested so far. At a parliamentary briefing today, the National Intelligence Service said that it was foreseen a provocation of what it called an upgraded ICBM that's faster and can fly a longer distance than the Hwasong-14. It added that the launch was likely a show that it can hit the U.S. and in opposition to China's sanctions on the regime, as well as to solidify internal unity. The NIS added that it cannot rule out the possibility of another nuclear test either. In light of Pyongyang's growing nuclear and ballistic missile threat, emergency planners in Hawaii, the closest U.S. state to North Korea, are reactivating a decades-old nuclear warning siren. The system, which was designed to alert residents of a Soviet nuclear attack during the Cold War, is being reinstated for the first time since the 1980s. Yoo Jun-hee has the story.
Hawaii is one of the world's top holiday destinations, renowned for its luxury resorts and its beautiful and serene natural landscape. But the calm was disturbed last Friday as the state's emergency authorities sounded off a nuclear attack warning siren for the first time in nearly 30 years. It was part of a test that'll be repeated every month from now on, alongside a public service announcement urging people to stay indoors and take shelter.
The basic guidance, again, if you hear this, is get inside, and stay tuned. Now, it sounds simple, but when you have that short a time, about 12 minutes after we get the notification, 12, 13 minutes, that is about all you can do.
Although North Korea was not mentioned specifically, a spokesperson for Hawaii's Emergency Management Agency said the system was being reactivated in light of Pyongyang's recent missile tests. Another agency spokesperson said 18,000 people would be killed outright and tens of thousands more would be injured in the event of a 150-kiloton warhead being detonated on Oahu, the most populated island in Hawaii. Early analysis from North Korea's ICBM test on Wednesday estimates its range at over 10,000 kilometers, putting Hawaii well within its crosshairs. On December 1st, the sirens will sound all across the islands once again, to a mix of worries and reassurances for the residents. Yoo Jun-hee, Arirang News.
Amid North Korea's latest missile provocation, President Moon Jae-in greeted the Sri Lankan president with the utmost respect and honor at the Blue House this morning. Our Blue House correspondent Hwang Ho-jun with this report.
A guard of honor and military band made up of around 300 soldiers from South Korean forces, a group of school children, and President Moon Jae-in himself greeted Sri Lankan President Maithripala Sirisena, the third state guest for Korea to receive this year. Presidents Moon and Sirisena inspected the honor guards together and exchanged greetings with the invited dignitaries from both countries before entering the Blue House, where a small-scale summit took place. The two leaders shared their thoughts on each other's governmental philosophy, with President Moon commending President Sirisena's pursuit to end authoritarianism, to bring about democracy, and to unify his people after the Civil War. Noting the two share similar values of putting people first, pursuing democracy and human rights, and rooting out corruption, President Moon proposed that Seoul and Colombo closely cooperate in the future. President Sirisena in return gave his best wishes for the upcoming Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. And regarding North Korea's missile launch on Wednesday morning, the Sri Lankan president expressed his strong support for South Korea. During the expanded summit meeting, which followed shortly after, Presidents Moon and Sirisena evaluated their country's 40-year-long bilateral relations and pledged to expand cooperation in various areas. The bolstered partnership will include economic cooperation that will allow South Korean companies to take part in Sri Lanka's infrastructure development projects. To aid Sri Lanka's sustainable economic growth, President Moon even pledged to increase Seoul's financial support to Sri Lanka for 3 years to $500 million from its current $300 million via the Economic Development Cooperation Fund by 2019. Also, both leaders agreed to increase people-to-people and cultural exchanges between the two countries. Such efforts to expand bilateral cooperation were reflected in the inking of key agreements and MOUs. In the evening, a state dinner in honor of the visiting president will be hosted by President Moon. The Blue House emphasized President Sirisena's visit to Korea will establish the foundation for the Korean government's new southern policy, which will broaden Seoul's diplomatic horizon beyond Northeast Asia to Southwest Asia. 황호준, Arirang News.
The OECD has sharply boosted Korea's economic growth forecast for this year, backed by improving exports and strong corporate investment. The international body also sees the global economy continuing its stable recovery this year. Kim Hyo-sun reports.
The OECD has hiked its 2017 economic growth forecast for Korea. It expects the Korean economy to grow 3.2% this year, far faster than its earlier estimate of 2.6%, backed by improving corporate investment and exports, led by the nation's semiconductor industry. The Korean government and the Bank of Korea both have a growth forecast of 3% for this year, with the International Monetary Fund recently upwardly revising its economic outlook for the country to 3.2%. The OECD also raised its outlook for next year to 3% from 2.8%, and predicts this trend will continue into 2019. Despite a slowdown in construction investment, the OECD said Seoul could continue 3% range growth, backed by a rebound in global trade and expansionary fiscal policy. Yet it also advised the Moon Jae-in administration to structurally reform the labor market in order to raise the nation's overall productivity. Meanwhile, the OECD also said in its latest outlook that the global economy is on course to grow 3.6% this year before reaching 3.7% next year, then ease back to 3.6% in 2019. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The Moon Jae-in government unveiled its 5-year housing welfare roadmap on Wednesday. The Transport Minister Kim Hyun-mi said in a briefing that the plan will supply 1 million public houses to young people, newlyweds, the elderly, and the low-income working families by 2022. 300,000 rental homes will be set aside for those under the age of 39 who are not homeowners, and loan programs for them will be expanded. The number of newlyweds eligible for housing support will be increased, and around 70,000 homes will be available at about 80% of the market price. The government will also allow elderly people without a stable income to sell their homes and receive the money in the form of a pension while living in public rental accommodation. Flights from Bali's main airport have been suspended for a second day as Mount Agung continues to spew ash thousands of meters into the atmosphere. Nearly 60,000 travelers have been stranded at Denpasar International Airport since Monday. Authorities plan to keep flights suspended until at least Wednesday and possibly even longer as the volcano is showing signs of moving toward a full-scale eruption. Korea's foreign ministry said Monday that it's drawing up measures to ensure the safety of its nationals on Bali and is providing alternative transportation, including ferries and buses, to help about 200 Korean tourists make the 12 to 13-hour journey from Bali to Juanda Airport on Indonesia's Java Island.
Good afternoon. It will get colder as the day goes on today, along with strong gusts. And Seoul and Daejeon will have single-digit afternoon highs at 5 and 8 degrees Celsius. And a thick layer of smog will get eased with strong winds. But sadly, we'll have frequent days with toxic smog during cold season, so wearing yellow dust mask is a must, while having some of household plants that help to purify indoor air will also be a great idea to breathe in a better air, such as English ivy and peace lily. And as for the weather outlook, expect to see freezing morning lows again starting tomorrow. The lows will plummet to -5 degrees Celsius. And on Friday, which is the first day of December, it's going to be an icy cold morning for Seoul at a low of -6 degrees Celsius. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While many regions in South Korea will have high levels of fine dust under mostly sunny skies at times, most of North Korea will have freezing afternoon highs to lower single digits. And as for major cities in Asia, thick, choking, toxic smog continues to envelop large parts of China, and Beijing will have cold afternoon highs at 1 degree Celsius. Meanwhile, those in Melbourne will have hotter weather on Wednesday under plenty of sunshine, so apply a good amount of sunblock and drink plenty of water. Heading to North America, those in Mexico City will be on a temperature roller coaster from single-digit morning lows to highs in the 20s for the time being. And as for South America, major cities on the continent will be under mostly sunny skies. Taking you to Europe, rain, cloudy skies to sunshine are on tap depending on the region. Lastly, to Africa, those in Cape Town will see strong gusty winds on Wednesday afternoon. And that's all the weather update for now.
And that is Arirang News for this afternoon. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned to find out more about North Korea's latest missile launch and more throughout the day.